They called her the rejected one. Madeline Ashford had vanished from society 3 years ago, moments after her fiancé abandoned her at the altar in front of every titled family in the county. The humiliation had been so complete, so public, that even her name became a cautionary tale whispered in drawing rooms. But tonight she would return to the ballroom where it all happened, and the most desired duke in England was about to notice her, in a way no one expected. The mirror reflected a woman Madeline barely recognized. Rose, her lady's maid, worked silently behind her, pinning the last dark curl into place with practiced efficiency. The deep emerald gown hugged her figure in ways that felt both foreign and empowering after 3 years of deliberate invisibility. Madeline studied her own reflection with the detachment of someone examining a stranger. The young girl who had once believed in love and fairy tales was gone. In her place stood someone harder, colder, someone who had learned that hope was dangerous and trust was foolish. Rose's hands stilled on her shoulders. The maid's eyes met hers in the mirror, warm with concern. "You look beautiful, miss. Like you never left." Madeline's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "That is precisely the problem, Rose. I did leave, and everyone will remember why." The door swung open without ceremony, and Clara burst into the room with the enthusiasm only a 20-year-old could possess. Her younger sister practically vibrated with excitement, her blonde curls bouncing as she rushed forward. "Madeline, you look absolutely stunning. Everyone will be speechless when you walk in." Madeline turned from the mirror, adjusting the delicate lace at her wrists. They were already speechless 3 years ago, Clara, for entirely different reasons. Clara's face fell slightly, but she recovered quickly, grasping Madeline's hands in hers. That was then. Tonight is different. Charles Whitmore was a coward and a fool, and everyone knows it now. His reputation is in tatters, while yours can be restored. The mention of his name sent a familiar chill through Madeline's chest. Charles Whitmore, the man who had promised her forever and delivered humiliation instead. She could still see his face that day, pale and determined, as he stood before their wedding guests and announced he could not marry her, that he had found someone else, someone with better connections, someone who sparkled in ways Madeline apparently did not. The scandal had been immediate and brutal. Whispers had followed her through every corridor, every street, pitying glances from women who secretly thanked their stars it wasn't them. Hungry stares from men who assumed rejection made her desperate, so she had done the only thing that made sense. She had disappeared. Ashford Manor, their country estate, had become her sanctuary and her prison. 3 years of walks through empty gardens, of piano played for no audience, of books read by firelight with only Rose for company. 3 years of telling herself she was content, that she preferred solitude to the cruelty of society. But her father had other ideas. Sir Thomas Ashford entered the room with his usual quiet authority. At 52, he carried himself with the dignity of old country nobility, though his eyes held a softness when they landed on his eldest daughter, Madeline. "You look every inch the lady you have always been." She met his gaze steadily. "Father, I have told you, this is unnecessary. I am perfectly content at home." He crossed the room to her, placing gentle hands on her shoulders. "Content is not the same as happy, my dear. You have punished yourself long enough for a crime you did not commit. Charles Whitmore's weakness is not your burden to carry forever." Madeline felt something crack inside her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. "I am not punishing myself. I am simply choosing not to subject myself to their judgment again." "Then choose to show them they were wrong to judge you at all." Clara bounced on her toes. "Father is right. And besides, Lady Pemberton's summer ball is the event of the season. The music, the dancing, the eligible gentlemen. You deserve to enjoy yourself." Madeline almost laughed at that. Eligible gentlemen, as if she would ever trust another man with her heart, as if she would ever be foolish enough to believe in promises again. But she saw the hope in her father's eyes, the love in Clara's eager expression, and felt her resolve weaken. Perhaps one evening would not kill her. Perhaps she could endure their stares and whispers for a few hours, prove to herself that Charles Whitmore no longer had the power to keep her hidden. "Very well. One ball. But do not expect me to dance with every titled bachelor who asks. I am attending to prove I can, not to find a husband. Sir Thomas smiled, relief evident in his features. That is all I ask, my dear. Simply be yourself. That has always been more than enough. The carriage ride to Pemberton Hall passed in tense silence. Madeline watched the countryside roll by through the window, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Clara chatted nervously beside her, pointing out landmarks and speculating about who might attend. Sir Thomas sat across from them, saying nothing but radiating quiet support. As they approached the grand estate, Madeline felt her heart begin to race. Lanterns illuminated the long drive, and carriages lined up ahead of them, disgorging elegantly dressed guests into the warm summer evening. Through the massive windows, she could see the ballroom already filling with movement and color. This was a mistake. She should have stayed home. But it was too late now. Their carriage pulled to a stop, and a footman appeared to help them down. Clara descended first, practically skipping with excitement. Sir Thomas followed, then turned to offer his hand to Madeline. She took a deep breath and placed her gloved hand in his. The grand foyer of Pemberton Hall gleamed with hundreds of candles. Crystal chandeliers threw dancing light across marble floors and gilded walls. The sound of a string quartet floated from the ballroom, mixing with the murmur of conversation and laughter. Madeline kept her chin high as they entered, though every instinct screamed at her to turn and run. Eyes found her immediately. She saw the recognition flash across familiar faces, saw mouths begin to move behind fans, saw the ripple of awareness spread through the crowd. The rejected one had returned. Lady Pemberton greeted them with genuine warmth, embracing Sir Thomas and gushing over Clara before turning to Madeline. "My dear Miss Ashford, how wonderful to see you again. You look absolutely radiant." Madeline smiled politely, murmuring appropriate thanks, but her attention had already shifted to the ballroom beyond. She could feel the weight of dozens of gazes, could practically hear the gossip beginning to circulate. Clara linked her arm through Madeline's, squeezing gently. "Ignore them. Hold your head high." Madeline did exactly that as they entered the ballroom proper. The massive space gleamed with elegance. Dancers already moved across the polished floor, while others clustered in small groups around the perimeter. She recognized many faces from 3 years ago, saw some of the same people who had witnessed her humiliation, but she refused to cower. They found a spot near one of the tall windows, and Clara immediately began pointing out various attendees, her commentary a mix of gossip and observation. Madeline listened with half her attention, her gaze sweeping the room with practiced detachment. And then the atmosphere shifted. Conversation seemed to pause, heads turning toward the main entrance. Even the music felt muted for a moment as someone entered. Madeline turned with everyone else, curiosity overriding her desire to remain aloof. A man stood in the doorway, tall and commanding in impeccable evening dress, dark hair, strong features, an expression that revealed nothing. But it was the way people moved, the way they seemed to instinctively give him space, that caught Madeline's attention. Clara leaned close, her voice dropping to an excited whisper. "That is the Duke of Blackthorn, Benjamin Ashford, the most desired and most impossible man in England." Madeline watched as the Duke moved into the room with quiet authority. People greeted him, but he acknowledged them with minimal courtesy, his dark eyes scanning the ballroom as if searching for something. And then those eyes found her. For a moment that stretched impossibly long, Benjamin Ashford looked directly at Madeline. His expression did not change, but something flickered in his gaze. Recognition, interest, something she could not quite name. Then he looked away, moving deeper into the crowd. But Madeline's heart continued to race, her breath caught somewhere in her chest. Because for the first time in 3 years, she had felt something other than numbness, and it terrified her. Clara's grip on Madeline's arm tightened as she leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper despite the music and conversation surrounding them. "You must have heard of him, Benjamin Ashford, Duke of Blackthorn. They say he is the most eligible bachelor in all of England, yet he has refused every match proposed to him for the past 5 years. Madeline forced her attention away from the Duke, who now stood conversing with several gentlemen near the far wall. She kept her voice deliberately neutral, If he refuses every match, then perhaps he is not as eligible as people claim. Clara shook her head, her eyes bright with the thrill of gossip. Oh, but that is what makes him so fascinating. He was engaged once, years ago, to Lady Catherine Morland. The wedding was planned, the contract signed, everything arranged, and then he ended it. Just weeks before the ceremony, he called it off because he said he could not marry without love. Despite herself, Madeline felt a flicker of interest. A man who had caused a scandal remarkably similar to her own, though from the opposite position. I imagine Lady Catherine was devastated. She was furious, actually. She married a viscount within 6 months just to save face, but the Duke, he simply returned to his estate and has been impossible to pin down ever since. Every mother with a daughter dreams of securing him, but he shows no interest in anyone. Madeline watched as Benjamin accepted a glass of champagne from a passing servant, his movements economical and controlled. Even from across the room, there was something undeniably magnetic about him. Not the flashy charm of men like Charles, but something quieter, more dangerous. Lady Margaret Pemberton materialized beside them with the practiced grace of a woman who thrived on social maneuvering. The older woman's smile was warm, but her eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement at having Madeline Ashford back in circulation. Miss Ashford, how delightful to see you looking so well, and just in time for the most interesting season we have had in years. Madeline dipped her head politely. You are too kind, Lady Pemberton. Your ball is as magnificent as I remember. Lady Pemberton's fan fluttered near her face as she leaned in conspiratorially. You must be curious about our mysterious Duke. Everyone is. He rarely attends such events, you know. His presence tonight has already set tongues wagging about which young lady might finally capture his attention. Madeline felt her defenses rising. She had no interest in being part of whatever marriage market machinations were at play. I am sure the Duke is perfectly capable of managing his own affairs without the assistance of gossip and speculation. Lady Pemberton laughed, clearly delighted by the response. Oh, my dear, you have not lost that sharp wit. How refreshing. Most young ladies simper and blush at the mere mention of him. But then you always were different, were you not? The words carried an edge that made Madeline's spine straighten. Different. The same word Charles had used when he explained why he could not marry her. Not sparkling enough, not charming enough. Simply different. Clara, sensing the tension, interjected brightly. Lady Pemberton, might you introduce us to some of your other guests? I am quite eager to see who else has arrived. As Lady Pemberton guided Clara away, still chattering about various attendees, Madeline found herself alone near the window. She took the opportunity to study the room more carefully, cataloguing the familiar faces and noting the changes 3 years had wrought. Several young women clustered near where the Duke stood, their postures carefully arranged to appear casual while clearly angling for his attention. He acknowledged them with polite brevity, but Madeline noticed he never quite engaged. His eyes would drift away mid-conversation, as if searching for something more interesting. She understood that feeling more than she cared to admit. A familiar voice made her tense. Miss Ashford. What an unexpected pleasure. She turned to find Lord Edmund Cartwright, one of Charles's closest friends, the same man who had stood as groomsman at the wedding that never happened. His smile was smooth, practiced, and entirely insincere. Lord Cartwright, I trust you are well, very well indeed. Though I must say, I am surprised to see you here. We had all assumed you preferred the quiet country life. The implication was clear. They had assumed she would remain hidden, nursing her wounds in private shame. Madeline met his gaze with cool composure. Assumptions are often incorrect, Lord Cartwright, as I am sure you have learned. His smile faltered slightly. Before he could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Cartwright, I believe Lady Thornbury was searching for you. Something about a promised dance. Benjamin Ashford stood beside them, his expression pleasantly neutral, but his dark eyes sharp with awareness. Lord Cartwright straightened immediately, his demeanor shifting from predatory to respectful in an instant. Your Grace. Of course. If you will excuse me. He retreated quickly, leaving Madeline alone with the Duke. She felt suddenly exposed, aware of how close he stood, of the subtle scent of sandalwood, and something indefinably masculine that seemed to surround him. Benjamin turned his full attention to her, and Madeleine realized with a jolt that Clara had been right. He was impossibly handsome, but it was more than that. There was an intensity in the way he looked at her, as if he saw past the carefully constructed armor she wore. "Miss Ashford, I presume. I am Benjamin Ashford, Duke of Blackthorn." She executed a curtsy that was technically correct, but deliberately less elaborate than protocol demanded. A small rebellion that she saw register in the slight quirk of his lips. "Your Grace, I am honored by your acquaintance." His mouth curved into what might have been amusement. "Are you? You sound decidedly uncertain about that honor." Madeleine blinked, caught off guard by his directness. Most men of his station hid behind layers of polite fiction. She found herself responding with equal honesty. "Forgive me, I am somewhat out of practice with ballroom pleasantries. So I have heard. You have been absent from society for some time." There it was. The acknowledgement of her scandal, delivered with neither judgment nor pity. Simply fact. Madeleine felt something shift in her chest, though she could not name what. "I have. And you, Your Grace, are notorious for avoiding social events despite constant invitations. Yet here we both are." His eyes held hers, and she saw something spark in their depths. Appreciation, perhaps. Recognition. Here we are indeed. "Tell me, Miss Ashford, are you glad to have returned, or do you wish yourself back at your estate?" The question was unexpectedly personal, cutting through all pretense. Madeleine found herself answering with more truth than she intended. "I am not certain yet. Ask me again at the end of the evening." He smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed his entire face. Madeleine felt her breath catch. "I shall do exactly that." Sir Thomas appeared at Madeleine's elbow, his expression pleased and slightly surprised to find her in conversation with the Duke. "Your Grace, what a pleasure to see you again." "Sir Thomas, the pleasure is mine. I was just making the acquaintance of your daughter." Benjamin turned back to Madeleine with that same intense focus that made her feel as if she were the only person in the crowded ballroom. "Miss Ashford, would you do me the honor of the next dance?" The request hung in the air between them. Madeleine felt every eye in the vicinity turned toward them, felt the weight of society's collective attention, the rejected one being asked to dance by the most desired duke in England. The symbolism was almost too heavy to bear. But there was something in Benjamin's gaze that steadied her. No pity, no agenda, just genuine interest and an unspoken question. Would she dare? Madeleine lifted her chin and met his eyes. "I would be honored, Your Grace." His hand extended, palm up, waiting. Madeleine placed her gloved hand in his and felt the warmth of his touch even through the fabric. He led her toward the dance floor with quiet confidence, and the crowd parted before them like water. As they took their positions for a waltz, Benjamin's hand settled at her waist. The touch was proper, correct, but Madeleine felt it like a brand. His other hand held hers firmly, and when the music began, he moved with the grace of someone who had mastered the art without effort. But it was not the dancing that undid her. It was the way he looked at her as they moved, not at her gown or her figure or even her face in the superficial way men usually assessed women. He looked into her eyes as if searching for something deeper. "You dance beautifully, Miss Ashford. You sound surprised, Your Grace." "Perhaps I am. I had been told you were too fragile to endure society. Yet here you are, holding your own quite admirably." Madeleine felt anger flare, quick and hot. "People say many things, Your Grace. Most of them are wrong. That much I believe absolutely." They moved in silence for several measures, the music swelling around them. Madeleine became acutely aware of every point of contact between them, of the solid strength in his frame, of the way he guided her through the steps with absolute certainty. She had danced with Charles many times, but it had never felt like this. Had never made her skin feel too tight and her heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with anxiety. When the waltz ended, Benjamin did not immediately release her. For a heartbeat, they stood there, his hand still at her waist, hers still in his grasp. Then he stepped back with controlled deliberation and bowed. "Thank you, Miss Ashford. That was unexpectedly delightful." Before she could respond, before she could even fully process what had just happened, he was gone. disappearing into the crowd with the same quiet authority he had used to enter it. Madeline stood alone on the edge of the dance floor, her heart pounding, her skin still tingling where he had touched her. And for the first time since Charles Whitmore destroyed her faith in love, Madeline Ashford felt herself begin to thaw. The realization terrified her far more than any amount of gossip ever could. Madeline retreated to the relative sanctuary of the terrace, needing air and space to collect herself. The French doors stood open, allowing the warm evening breeze to drift through gauze curtains that billowed like ghosts. Several other guests lingered outside, but she found a quiet corner partially hidden by a marble column and an arrangement of potted roses. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed them against the cool stone balustrade. The waltz with Benjamin had lasted perhaps 4 minutes. 4 minutes that had somehow managed to crack the careful numbness she had cultivated for 3 years. This was precisely why she had stayed away. Feelings were dangerous, hope was treacherous, and men, no matter how different they seemed, ultimately proved themselves the same. A voice spoke from behind her, low and unmistakably amused. "Hiding already, Miss Ashford? The evening has barely begun." Madeline turned to find Benjamin standing in the shadows near the doorway, partially concealed by the billowing curtains. In the dim light from the ballroom, his features were all sharp angles and dark mystery. She felt her pulse quicken, despite every effort to remain composed. "I am not hiding, Your Grace, I am simply taking air." He moved toward her with that same controlled grace she had noticed during their dance. When he stopped, he was closer than propriety strictly allowed, though not close enough to be scandalous. "Forgive me. I should not have abandoned you so abruptly after our waltz. It was discourteous." Madeline lifted one shoulder in what she hoped appeared as indifference. "You owe me no explanation, Your Grace. A single dance creates no obligation." His eyes studied her face with unnerving intensity. "Does it not? I had always believed that to ask a lady to dance was to claim a certain responsibility for her comfort and reputation. Then you are more honorable than most men of my acquaintance." The words came out sharper than she intended, edged with old pain. Benjamin's expression shifted, something like understanding crossing his features. "I suspect your acquaintance includes at least one man who proved himself profoundly dishonorable." Madeline felt her defenses slam into place. She straightened, preparing to deliver a cutting dismissal, but he continued before she could speak. "I am not asking you to share your history, Miss Ashford. I am simply acknowledging that it exists, and that it has clearly taught you to expect the worst from everyone, myself included." The directness of it caught her completely off guard. Most people danced around her scandal with elaborate pretense or malicious innuendo. No one simply stated the truth so plainly. "You know nothing about me, Your Grace. I know you disappeared from society 3 years ago after a very public humiliation. I know you have returned tonight with armor so thick I am surprised you can move beneath its weight. And I know that during our dance, for perhaps 30 seconds, you forgot to maintain that armor. It was the most interesting thing I have seen in months." Madeline stared at him, caught between outrage and something disturbingly close to fascination. Who spoke like this? Who cut through all social pretense with such ruthless honesty? "You are remarkably presumptuous, Your Grace." "I am. It is one of my more charming qualities." His mouth curved into a slight smile, and Madeline found herself fighting an inappropriate urge to smile back. Instead, she executed another curtsy, this one even less formal than the first. She saw his eyes light with something that might have been delight. "You do that deliberately." "Do what, Your Grace?" "That curtsy. It is technically correct, but somehow manages to convey utter indifference to my title and station. I find it refreshingly honest. Perhaps I am simply out of practice, or perhaps you are making a point." He moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "I wonder, Miss Ashford, if you realize how rare genuine honesty is among people of our class. Most spend their entire lives performing elaborate deceptions, but you wear your disdain like a badge of honor. I wear nothing. I simply exist as I am. And what you are is fascinating." Before Madeline could respond, before she could even process the compliment hidden in those words, voices drifted from inside. Sir Thomas appeared in the doorway, his expression lighting when he spotted them. "Ah, there you are, my dear, Your Grace. I hope my daughter has not been monopolizing your time." Benjamin turned with easy courtesy, though Madeline noticed he positioned himself slightly between her and the doorway, as if shielding her from whatever might emerge from the ballroom. "Not at all, Sir Thomas. I was just convincing Miss Ashford to grant me another dance." Madeline opened her mouth to protest, but her father's delighted expression stopped her. "How wonderful! Madeline, you must not refuse His Grace. He has shown you such particular attention this evening." The weight of expectation pressed down on her shoulders. She saw the hope in her father's eyes, the calculation in the glances of several ladies who had drifted closer to observe. Everyone watching to see if the rejected one would dare reach for something better. She should refuse, should retreat back into her comfortable isolation before this dangerous spark between her and Benjamin grew into something she could not control. But when she met Benjamin's gaze, she saw no pressure there. No agenda, just a question and a curious invitation, as if he genuinely wanted to dance with her again for no reason other than the pleasure of it. "Very well, Your Grace. I accept." His smile this time was brilliant, unguarded for just a moment before he schooled his features back into polite neutrality. He offered his arm and Madeline placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, feeling the solid warmth of him through the layers of fabric. They returned to the ballroom, and Madeline felt the ripple of awareness that followed them. Conversations paused, fans fluttered, eyes tracked their progress across the floor with hungry interest. Benjamin led her into position as the orchestra began a new waltz. His hand settled at her waist with the same confident touch as before, and Madeline felt that same unsettling warmth spread through her body. They began to move, and this time Madeline allowed herself to truly notice everything. The way he guided her with subtle pressure, anticipating the music and the movements before they happened, the faint scent of sandalwood and night air that clung to him, the heat of his palm burning through her gown. "You dance as if you have done this 1,000 times, she said, needing to break the charged silence. "I have, though rarely with such interesting partners. I am not certain if that is a compliment or an insult. It is an observation. Most young ladies I dance with are so concerned with propriety that they barely breathe. You, Miss Ashford, appear to breathe just fine. Perhaps that is because I have nothing left to lose. My reputation is already damaged beyond repair." His hand tightened fractionally at her waist. "Or perhaps you simply care less about the opinions of people who do not matter." "And which people matter, Your Grace? The ones who see you clearly and value what they see." The music swelled around them, and they moved together with increasing synchronization. Madeline became aware that her breathing had synchronized with his, that their steps flowed together as if choreographed. This was dangerous territory, this feeling of connection, of being seen and understood. She had felt something similar with Charles once, and look how that had ended. As if reading her thoughts, Benjamin spoke quietly. "Whatever happened to you, Miss Ashford, it was not your fault. I hope you know that." Madeline missed a step, stumbling slightly. Benjamin caught her smoothly, his arm supporting her until she found her rhythm again. But the damage was done. The careful walls she had built threatened to crumble under the weight of his unexpected kindness. "You know nothing about what happened to me. I know enough. I know a man made promises he did not keep. I know he humiliated you publicly rather than having the courage to be honest privately. And I know you have been punishing yourself for his failures ever since." Madeline pulled back slightly, but his hand held her firmly in the dance. "Stop, please. You do not get to dissect my life simply because we have shared 2 dances. You are right. I apologize." His voice softened. "But know this, Miss Ashford. Whatever conclusions you have drawn about yourself based on that man's choices, I suspect they are profoundly wrong." The waltz ended. They stood facing each other as the music faded, the ballroom noise rushing back in like a tide. Madeline felt exposed, raw, as if he had reached inside her chest and rearranged something fundamental. Benjamin bowed, this time with complete formality. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Ashford, and for your patience with my presumptuous observations." He began to turn away, but Madeline found herself speaking before she could stop herself. "Your Grace." He paused, looking back at her with raised eyebrows. She should let him go. should retreat to safety and forget this dangerous spark between them. Instead, she heard herself say, "I do not find your observations entirely unwelcome." His entire expression transformed. The careful mask dropped away, revealing something genuine and pleased and entirely too attractive. "Then perhaps you will permit me to call on you at Ashford Manor. I find myself intensely curious to continue our conversation." Madeline's heart hammered against her ribs. This was foolish, dangerous, everything she had sworn to avoid. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "Perhaps I will." Benjamin smiled again, that rare, genuine expression that made him look younger and infinitely more dangerous to her carefully constructed defenses. "Until then, Miss Ashford." He disappeared into the crowd once more, leaving Madeline standing alone on the edge of the dance floor. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her racing heart beneath her palm. Clara appeared at her elbow, practically vibrating with excitement. "Madeline, everyone is talking about it. The Duke danced with you twice." "Twice? Do you know what that means?" Madeline did know. In the language of high society, 2 dances was a declaration of serious interest. It was the beginning of courtship. "It means nothing," she said, but the words felt hollow even to her own ears. Because despite every wall she had built, despite every vow she had made, despite 3 years of careful numbness, Madeline Ashford had just felt something real. And God help her, she wanted to feel it again. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of whispers and sidelong glances. Madeline endured a dance with Lord Havisham, a pleasant but forgettable conversation with Lady Thornbury, and Clara's relentless stream of speculation. But her attention kept drifting across the ballroom to where Benjamin stood in conversation with various gentlemen. His posture relaxed, but his eyes occasionally finding hers through the crowd. Each time their gazes met, Madeline felt that same dangerous flutter in her chest, the same treacherous warmth that made her forget why she had sworn never to feel this way again. She told herself it meant nothing, that he was simply being polite. That tomorrow he would forget all about the damaged goods he had danced with at Lady Pemberton's ball. But then he appeared at her side, as if summoned by her thoughts, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Miss Ashford, I find myself in need of rescuing. Lord Pemberton is determined to introduce me to his niece, and I fear I lack the energy for another conversation about needlework and the weather." Madeline felt her lips twitch despite herself. "And you believe I'm capable of providing such rescue, Your Grace?" "I believe you are capable of a great many things, Miss Ashford, including saving me from an evening of tedium." Before she could respond, he had already turned to Sir Thomas, who sat nearby engaged in conversation with several other fathers. "Sir Thomas, would you permit me one more dance with your daughter? I promise to return her safely." Her father's eyes widened with poorly concealed delight. "Of course, Your Grace." Madeline would be honored. 3 dances. The number echoed in Madeline's mind as Benjamin once again offered his arm. 3 dances was beyond interest. 3 dances was a public declaration. By morning, every household in the county would be speculating about an impending engagement. She should refuse, should protect herself from the inevitable disappointment. But when she looked at Benjamin, she saw only genuine pleasure at the prospect of her company. No calculation, no hidden agenda. Just a man who seemed to genuinely want to dance with her. "Very well, Your Grace, though I suspect you are causing quite the scandal." His eyes glinted with something that might have been mischief. "Good. Scandals are far more interesting than propriety." This waltz was different from the first 2. Perhaps because they both knew everyone was watching, perhaps because the pretense of casual interest had been thoroughly shattered. Perhaps because with each moment they spent together, the connection between them grew stronger. Benjamin pulled her fractionally closer than strictly proper, his hand firm at her waist. Madeline felt the heat of his palm through the silk of her gown, felt the solid strength of his frame as they moved together. Her breath came shorter, her skin felt too warm, and when his thumb traced a subtle circle against her waist, she nearly stumbled again. "Careful, Miss Ashford. I would hate for you to injure yourself." His voice held a note of amusement that suggested he knew exactly what effect he was having on her. "Perhaps you should focus more on proper dance form and less on conversation, Your Grace. But then we would miss the opportunity to speak freely, and I find our conversations far too interesting to sacrifice for perfect form." They moved through a turn, and Madeline found herself pressed even closer for a heartbeat before the steps separated them again. She was acutely aware of every point of contact, every brush of his fingers, every moment when their bodies aligned in the dance. This was more than attraction, more than simple interest. This felt like recognition, as if some part of her had been waiting for someone who would see past her walls and value what lay beneath. The thought terrified her. "You are thinking too much," Benjamin said quietly. "I can see it in your expression." The use of his given name startled her. "You presume a great deal, Your Grace. I do. It is one of my more irritating habits. But I notice you did not correct me when I called you by your Christian name just now, because I was surprised. Not because I granted permission, yet you are not asking me to stop." He was right. She should insist on formality, on maintaining proper distance, but the truth was, she liked the way her name sounded in his voice, liked the intimacy it suggested. "You are impossible," she said instead. "So I have been told, repeatedly. Yet here you are dancing with me for the third time this evening, only because you manipulated my father into granting permission. Did I? Or did you want an excuse to accept?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Madeline met his gaze directly, seeing the challenge there. The invitation, to be honest. "Perhaps both can be true, Your Grace." His expression shifted, something warm and pleased crossing his features. "Benjamin. When we are alone, I would prefer you call me Benjamin. We are not alone. We are in a ballroom filled with dozens of people. Then we shall have to remedy that situation. Soon." The promise in those words sent a shiver down Madeline's spine. This was happening too fast. She was feeling too much, wanting too much, after swearing she would never allow herself to be vulnerable again. But Benjamin was nothing like Charles. Where Charles had been all surface charm and calculated moves, Benjamin was direct and honest. Where Charles had made her feel inadequate, Benjamin made her feel seen, valued. The music ended far too soon. They stood facing each other as the final notes faded, neither moving to separate immediately. Madeline could feel her heart racing, could see the rapid rise and fall of her own chest. Benjamin's eyes darkened as he looked at her, his gaze dropping briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes. "Thank you, Miss Ashford, for indulging my selfish desire for your company." His voice had gone rough around the edges, and Madeline realized with a start that he was affected too. This attraction, this connection, was not one-sided. The knowledge was both exhilarating and terrifying. Sir Thomas appeared before either of them could say more, his expression radiating approval. "Your Grace, might I have a word before you depart this evening?" Benjamin's attention shifted smoothly to her father, though his hand lingered at Madeline's waist for a moment longer than necessary. "Of course, Sir Thomas. I would be honored." The two men stepped away toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. Madeline watched them go, her mind racing with speculation. What could Benjamin possibly want to discuss with her father? Clara materialized at her elbow, gripping her arm with barely contained excitement. 3 dances, Madeline. 3. Do you understand what this means? He is going to ask to court you properly. I know it. Madeline forced herself to breathe normally. You are speculating wildly. He is simply being kind to someone who has been out of society. Kind? Clara's eyes were bright with disbelief. Madeline, the Duke of Blackthorn, does not dance 3 times with someone out of kindness. He barely dances at all. Everyone is talking about it. Lady Pemberton looks as if she might faint from the excitement. Madeline's hands trembled slightly, so she clasped them together. It means nothing. Tomorrow he will return to his estate and forget this evening ever happened. But even as she spoke the words, she knew they were a lie. Tonight had changed something fundamental. Benjamin had seen past her armor, had challenged her assumptions, had made her feel things she had sworn never to feel again. And now he was speaking with her father in tones too low to overhear, their expressions serious and intent. Several minutes later, the 2 men returned. Sir Thomas looked positively jubilant, while Benjamin's expression remained controlled, though his eyes sought Madeline's immediately. "Miss Ashford, your father has graciously given me permission to call upon you at Ashford Manor. I hope this arrangement is acceptable to you as well." The formal request hung in the air between them. This was real. This was happening. Benjamin wanted to court her properly, with her father's blessing and society's knowledge. She should refuse, should protect herself from inevitable heartbreak. But when she looked at Benjamin, she saw only patient waiting. No pressure, no assumption, just genuine hope that she would say yes. Madeleine took a breath and made a choice that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "I would be pleased to receive you, Your Grace." Benjamin's smile was immediate and unguarded, transforming his entire face. He took her hand and brought it to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that burned through her glove. "Until tomorrow then, Miss Ashford. I find myself already counting the hours." He bowed to both her and Clara, nodded to Sir Thomas, and departed with that same quiet authority that seemed to follow him everywhere. Madeleine stood frozen, her hand still tingling where his lips had touched, her heart racing with equal parts hope and terror. In the carriage ride home, Sir Thomas could not contain his pleasure. "The Duke of Blackthorn, Madeleine, one of the most eligible men in England, has requested permission to court my daughter. This is beyond anything I could have hoped for." Clara bounced in her seat. "It is so romantic, like something from a novel. The rejected lady returning to society and capturing the heart of the impossible duke." Madeleine said nothing, staring out the window at the dark countryside rolling past. She wanted to share their joy, wanted to believe this fairy tale could have a happy ending. But she remembered too well how fairy tales could turn into nightmares, how promises could shatter, how love could transform into humiliation. That night, alone in her room with only Rose for company, Madeleine stood at her window and looked out at the moonlit gardens. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the wild beating of her heart. Tomorrow Benjamin would come. Tomorrow this dangerous connection would deepen. Tomorrow she would take another step away from the safety of numbness and toward the terrifying possibility of feeling again. She thought of his eyes meeting hers across the ballroom, of his hand warm at her waist, of his voice saying her name like a prayer. And despite every vow she had made, despite every wall she had built, despite 3 years of careful self-protection, Madeleine Ashford realized something that made her chest ache with longing and fear in equal measure. She wanted him to come tomorrow, wanted to see him again, wanted to know where this impossible connection might lead. For the first time in 3 years, she wanted something more than safety. She wanted to live again, even if it destroyed her. Morning arrived with pale sunlight streaming through Madeleine's windows. She had barely slept, replaying every moment of the ball, every word Benjamin had spoken, every touch during their dances. Rose helped her dress in soft lavender, arranging her hair with unusual care. Neither mentioned why, but both knew. Benjamin had promised to call today. The hours crawled by. Madeleine tried to read, but the words blurred. She retreated to the music room, her fingers finding melodies at the piano. For the first time in years, she played something hopeful rather than melancholy. Clara appeared in the doorway with a knowing smile. "You are playing happy music. I cannot remember the last time." Before Madeleine could respond, Sir Thomas entered carrying an envelope bearing the Duke of Blackthorn's seal. Her heart lurched. A letter, not a visit. With trembling hands, she broke the seal. "Miss Ashford, I regret that urgent business requires my immediate attention in London. I must postpone my intended visit to Ashford Manor. Please accept my sincere apologies. I remain, as always, your humble servant, Benjamin Ashford, Duke of Blackthorn." The words felt like a blade between her ribs. "He sends his regrets," she said flatly. "Business in London demands his attention." Sir Thomas's face fell. "I am certain it is merely a delay, my dear. Of course. How foolish of me to expect otherwise." She walked from the room with deliberate grace, climbed to her chambers and closed the door. Only then did she allow herself to feel the full weight of it. She had been right to guard her heart. Men made promises they did not keep. It was the natural order of things. The days blurred together. Madeleine returned to old routines with grim determination. Long walks, hours at the piano, books read in solitary silence. She told herself she was fine, that she had expected this. But at night she could not stop replaying the ball, the way Benjamin had looked at her, the warmth of his hand at her waist, Had it all been performance? A week passed, then 2. No word came from Benjamin. Despite her efforts to return to numb acceptance, something had changed. She found herself choosing dresses with more care, even with no plans to go anywhere. She caught herself listening for approaching horses, while telling herself she did not care if he ever came. One afternoon, Madeline caught sight of herself in the mirror and felt angry confusion. She was doing it again, hoping, waiting, allowing a man to dictate her emotional state. She had sworn never to do this again. That evening, Clara attempted conversation at dinner. Lady Thornbury says the Duke has been in London at various functions, quite occupied with parliamentary business. Madeline cut her meat with precision. How fascinating. She also mentioned several young ladies have attempted to secure his attention, but he has shown no particular interest. Madeline set down her utensils with careful control. Clara, the Duke of Blackthorn's activities are of no concern to me. Later, alone at the drawing-room window, Madeline pressed her forehead against the cool glass and allowed herself honesty. She missed him. Missed a man she had spent one evening with. Missed the way he had seen past her defenses. Missed feeling truly alive. And she hated herself for it. Hated that one night with Benjamin Ashford had made her vulnerable again. Rapid hoofbeats made her lift her head. Through the window, a horse and rider approached at dangerous speed. The rider headed straight for the creek, marking their property boundary. The horse jumped without slowing, and Madeline glimpsed the rider's face. Benjamin. She grabbed a shawl and hurried outside. By the time she reached the creek, Benjamin had dismounted, his usually impeccable appearance disheveled. Hair wind-blown, cravat askew, coat dusty. Miss Ashford. His voice was rough, breathless. I apologize for the intrusion. You nearly killed yourself with that jump, Your Grace. I was not thinking clearly. What are you doing here? He stepped closer, turmoil evident in his expression. I told myself I needed time. Distance. I spent 2 weeks in London trying to convince myself that what I felt was momentary attraction, that it would fade. And did it fade, Your Grace? No. If anything, it grew stronger, until I could not bear another day away. Madeline felt tears prick her eyes. You left. You sent a formal letter and disappeared for 2 weeks. Do you have any idea what that felt like? I do. Every day I stayed away felt like suffocating. Then why did you stay away at all? Because I was afraid. Because caring for someone truly means risking everything, and I have not been willing to risk that, until now. You do not get to leave me waiting, doubting myself, and then return with pretty words expecting everything to be fine. You are right. Benjamin's voice dropped. I handled this badly. I hurt you when that was the last thing I wanted. I am truly sorry. I cannot allow myself to hope only to be abandoned again. I survived it once. I will not survive it twice. I am only asking for a chance to prove I am worthy of eventual trust. And what happens the next time you are afraid? Do you simply disappear again? His hand touched her cheek gently. No. Next time I will stay. I will fight through it instead of running. How can you promise that? Because these 2 weeks without you were worse than any fear I have experienced. I am done running from the best thing that has happened to me in years. She found him looking at her with raw honesty. Benjamin. Yes? If you leave me again like that, I will not be here when you return. I understand, and I will not leave. Not like that. Not ever. Madeline knew she should step away, should protect herself. But instead, she leaned into his touch, allowing this moment of vulnerability. Tomorrow she would rebuild her defenses. Tomorrow she would remember why this was dangerous. But tonight, with Benjamin's hand warm against her face and his eyes promising impossible things, she allowed herself to hope. Just a little, just enough. Before we continue with Madeline and Benjamin's story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like Madeline, caught between the safety of protecting your heart and the terrifying possibility of opening it again? Drop a comment and let me know what you think she should do. And if you are enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss what happens next. Trust me, you will want to see where this connection leads. The following morning arrived with golden sunlight and birdsong. Madeline woke with a strange lightness in her chest, the memory of Benjamin's touch still warm on her skin. He had stayed for another hour last night, talking quietly by the creek until propriety demanded he leave. But before departing, he had promised to return. Today. And this time, she believed him. After breakfast, restlessness drove her outside. The day was too beautiful to waste indoors, and her thoughts were too turbulent for sitting still. She changed into a walking dress of deep blue and set out toward the wooded path that bordered the creek, the same creek Benjamin had jumped so recklessly the night before. The woods were cool and quiet, dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves overhead. Madeline followed the familiar trail, letting her mind wander. For the first time in 3 years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that included more than solitary walks and quiet resignation. Perhaps Benjamin was different. Perhaps this connection between them was real. Perhaps she could learn to trust again without losing herself in the process. The sound of hoofbeats startled her from her thoughts. She turned just as a large black horse burst through the undergrowth at dangerous speed, its rider barely maintaining control. Madeline jumped back with a gasp, her heart racing. The horse veered sharply, missing her by mere feet before the rider managed to bring it to a halt several yards away. Benjamin dismounted in one fluid motion, his expression shifting from alarm to relief when he saw she was unharmed. "Miss Ashford, are you hurt?" Madeline pressed a hand to her racing heart. "No, though you seem determined to run me down at every opportunity, Your Grace." He moved toward her quickly, his eyes scanning her face with concern. "Forgive me, I was riding too fast. I did not expect anyone to be walking this path." Madeline's initial fright gave way to irritation. "Perhaps because this path runs through Ashford land, Your Grace. You are currently trespassing." Benjamin stopped, genuine surprise crossing his features. He looked around, then back at the creek, visible through the trees. "I thought the boundary was at the creek itself." "It is." "You're on the wrong side of it." Understanding dawned on his face, followed by what looked remarkably like amusement. "I see. Then I owe you an apology for both the near collision and the property violation." Madeline found her own lips twitching despite her attempt to maintain indignation. "You make a habit of dramatic entrances, it seems. Yesterday jumping the creek at sunset, today nearly trampling me in my own woods. If I promise to use gates and proper roads from now on, will you forgive my theatrical tendencies?" She tilted her head, studying him. In the filtered sunlight, with his hair slightly disheveled from riding and his expression open, he looked younger, less imposing, more human. "I suppose I could be persuaded. Though I must ask, what has you racing through the countryside at such reckless speeds?" Benjamin's expression softened, eagerness. "I told you I would return today, and I found myself unable to wait until an appropriate calling hour. You do realize it is barely past 10 in the morning." "I do, which is why I was riding the perimeter of your estate, rather than approaching the house. I thought I might calm my impatience with exercise before presenting myself properly." The admission was so unexpectedly honest that Madeline felt her remaining irritation dissolve. "Well, since you are already here, and since you have already invaded my property, perhaps you might walk with me, unless your horse requires immediate attention." Benjamin glanced back at the animal, which now grazed peacefully nearby. "He will be fine. I would be honored to walk with you." He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Madeline took it. They began walking slowly along the creek path, the sound of water flowing over stones a gentle accompaniment to their steps. For several minutes neither spoke. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that suggested no need to fill every moment with conversation. Madeline found herself acutely aware of the solid warmth of his arm beneath her hand, of the way their steps naturally synchronized. "This is beautiful," Benjamin said finally, his gaze taking in the dappled woods and sparkling water. "Do you walk here often?" "Nearly every day. It has been my refuge for 3 years." He looked at her with that penetrating focus she was coming to recognize. A refuge from what exactly? From pity? From gossip? From people who could not decide if I was a tragic figure or simply defective? The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. Benjamin stopped walking, gently turning her to face him. You are neither tragic nor defective, Madeline. You are simply someone who trusted the wrong person. The use of her given name sent warmth through her chest. You say that with such certainty. As if you know me, I am beginning to. And what I know I find remarkable. Madeline looked away, uncomfortable with the compliment, but unable to deny the pleasure it gave her. Tell me something about yourself, she said, deliberately changing the subject. Something real, not the gossip and speculation that follows you through society. Benjamin considered for a moment, then began walking again, guiding her along the path. I broke my engagement to Lady Catherine because I realized I was choosing duty over happiness, over truth. Her family was well connected, the match was advantageous, everyone expected it. But when I looked at her, I felt nothing, and I knew that marrying her would mean spending my entire life pretending. That must have caused quite a scandal. It did. And for a long time I convinced myself that the scandal proved I had been selfish, that I should have honored my commitment regardless of my feelings. And now I believe that honoring a false commitment would have been the truly selfish act. It would have trapped both of us in a lie. Madeline thought about Charles, about the promises he had made and broken. But where Charles had abandoned her for someone more advantageous, Benjamin had walked away from advantage itself in pursuit of authenticity. Do you regret it? Not for a moment. Though I do regret the pain it caused Catherine. She did not deserve that humiliation. Even if the marriage would have been wrong, at least you called it off before the wedding. Some men wait until they are standing at the altar. The words came out more bitter than she intended. Benjamin's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. He was a coward and a fool, Madeline. And his loss is my extraordinary good fortune. She felt tears prick her eyes at the simple sincerity in his voice. You barely know me. Then let me remedy that. Tell me something real about you, not the gossip, not the scandal, just you. They had reached a spot where a fallen log created a natural bench overlooking the creek. Benjamin guided her to sit, then settled beside her, maintaining a respectful distance while still close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Madeline watched the water flow past, gathering her thoughts. I used to believe in fairy tales, in true love and happy endings, and the idea that goodness would be rewarded. Charles destroyed that belief so thoroughly that I could not even mourn it. I simply felt foolish for ever believing at all. And now I am trying to remember that not all stories end in disappointment, that perhaps some risks are worth taking. Benjamin's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with hers gently. I want to be worth that risk, Madeline. I want to prove that not all men are cowards, that some of us are capable of keeping our promises. She turned to look at him, finding his dark eyes filled with an intensity that stole her breath. And what promises are you making, Benjamin? That I will be honest with you. Always. That I will not run when things become difficult. That I will value you not for what you represent or what connections you bring, but for who you are. Those are significant promises. I know. And I intend to keep every one of them. The space between them felt charged with possibility. Madeline was acutely aware of his hand holding hers, of the way his thumb traced gentle circles on her skin, of the fact that they were completely alone in the woods with no one to observe or judge. She should pull away, should maintain proper distance, should remember that she had been hurt before and could be hurt again. But when Benjamin leaned slightly closer, his eyes asking permission, she found herself leaning in as well. The kiss was gentle, tentative, asking rather than demanding. His lips moved against hers with careful reverence, as if she were something precious that might break. Madeline felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been frozen for 3 years suddenly beginning to thaw. When they separated, both breathing slightly harder, Benjamin rested his forehead against hers. I have wanted to do that since the moment I first saw you at that ball. Madeline's laugh came out breathless. You wanted to kiss the rejected wallflower? I wanted to kiss the most fascinating woman in the room, the one who looked at society with clear eyes and refused to pretend. She pulled back enough to meet his gaze. What are we doing, Benjamin? We are taking a risk, together. He smiled, that rare, genuine expression that transformed his face. "Unless you would prefer to return to safety and solitude." Madeline thought about it, about the comfortable numbness of the past 3 years, about the walls she had built to protect herself, about the price of safety. Then she thought about the way Benjamin looked at her, the honesty in his voice, the warmth of his hand still holding hers. "No," she said finally. "I think perhaps I am done with safety." "Good, because I find I am quite done with being careful." They sat together by the creek for another hour, talking and laughing and discovering each other. And when Benjamin finally escorted her back toward the manor, promising to return the next day through proper channels this time, Madeline felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. Real, terrifying, wonderful hope. And for the first time, she was not afraid of it. True to his word, Benjamin began calling on Ashford Manor with a regularity that set tongues wagging throughout the county. He arrived each afternoon like clockwork, always impeccably dressed, always bearing some small, thoughtful gift. A book of poetry he thought she would enjoy. Sheet music for a piece he had heard her play. Hothouse roses the color of sunset. Sir Thomas observed the courtship with barely contained delight. Clara fluttered about like an excited butterfly, constantly finding excuses to peek into whichever room Madeline and Benjamin occupied. Even Rose smiled more frequently, her knowing look suggesting she approved of the Duke's persistent attention. But it was the time alone with Benjamin that Madeline treasured most. They played chess in the library, his strategic mind matching hers, move for move. They walked the gardens, discussing everything from philosophy to politics to the mundane details of daily life. He sat beside her at the piano, turning pages while she played, occasionally humming along in a pleasant baritone that made her fingers stumble on the keys. And slowly, carefully, Madeline found herself changing. She began choosing brighter colors for her morning dresses. She wore her hair in more elaborate styles, even on days when she knew Benjamin would not visit. She caught herself smiling at random moments, remembering something he had said, or the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. She was coming back to life, and it terrified her as much as it exhilarated her. One afternoon, nearly 3 weeks after the ball, they sat together in the music room. Rain pattered against the windows, creating a cocoon of warmth and intimacy. Madeline had been playing a melancholy piece when Benjamin gently stilled her hands. "Why do you always choose the saddest songs?" She looked down at the keys, uncomfortable with the question. "I suppose they match my temperament." His fingers traced patterns on the back of her hand. Did match, past tense. "I think you are not nearly as melancholy as you pretend to be." Madeline withdrew her hands, standing and moving to the window. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the garden beyond into impressionist beauty. "You think you know me so well after a few weeks?" She heard him rise, felt his presence behind her, though he did not touch. "I know that you smile more now, that you have stopped wearing nothing but grays and blacks. That sometimes when you think no one is watching, you look almost happy. Almost happy is not the same as happy. No, but it is progress." She turned to face him, her back against the windowsill. "And what if this is as close as I can get? What if Charles damaged something in me that cannot be fully repaired?" Benjamin moved closer, his hands coming to rest on either side of her, caging her gently against the window. "Then I will take almost happy. I will take whatever you can give and consider myself fortunate." His proximity made her breath catch. She could see the pulse at his throat, could smell the subtle scent of sandalwood and rain. "Why? Why are you so patient with me?" "Because you are worth the patience. Because I understand what it means to guard your heart after it has been mishandled. And because I am not interested in some pale imitation of you. I want the real thing, even if it comes slowly." Before she could stop herself, Madeline reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I want to trust this. Trust you. But every time I start to feel safe, a voice in my head reminds me that Charles made me feel safe too. That I believed his promises. That I was wrong." Benjamin turned his head, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Then let me address that voice directly. I am not Charles. I will never be Charles. And if I ever give you reason to doubt me, I want you to tell me immediately so I can correct it. How can you promise that? Because losing you would be worse than any discomfort that comes from difficult conversations." The sincerity in his voice undid something inside her. Madeline pulled his face down to hers, kissing him with an urgency that surprised them both. This kiss was different from their first by the creek. This was need and want, and 3 years of frozen emotions beginning to burn. Benjamin responded immediately, one hand sliding to her waist while the other cupped the back of her neck. He kissed her deeply, thoroughly, as if memorizing the taste of her. Madeline felt herself melting against him, her hands fisting in his coat to pull him closer. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Benjamin rested his forehead against hers. "We should stop. Your father could walk in at any moment. I know." But neither of them moved. They stood pressed together, hearts racing, the rain outside providing a soundtrack to their shared breathing. "Madeline, I need to tell you something." The serious tone in his voice made her pull back to look at him. "What is it?" "These past weeks have been the happiest I can remember. Being with you, talking with you, simply existing in the same space as you. It has made me realize something." Her heart began to race for different reasons. "What have you realized?" "That I am falling in love with you. Deeply, irrevocably in love with you." The words hung between them, enormous and terrifying and wonderful all at once. Madeline felt tears prick her eyes. "Benjamin, You do not have to say it back. I am not telling you this to pressure you or to demand reciprocation. I am telling you because I want you to know. Because I want to be honest about what I feel, even if it is too soon or too much. It is not too soon." "No?" Madeline touched his face again, her thumb tracing his lower lip. "It is terrifying and overwhelming and probably foolish, but no, it is not too soon, because I feel it too." She watched hope and joy flood his expression, transforming him into someone younger and infinitely more vulnerable. "You do?" "I do. I tried not to. I tried to maintain my walls and protect myself. But you, Benjamin Ashford, you are remarkably good at dismantling defenses." He kissed her again, this time with such tenderness that Madeline felt her last remaining walls begin to crumble. When they separated, both smiling, she rested her head against his chest and listened to the steady beating of his heart. "I am still afraid," she admitted quietly. "I know, and I still have moments when I expect you to disappear. I know that too, but I want this. I want you, even though it terrifies me." His arms tightened around her. "Then we will be terrified together." They stood like that for long minutes, wrapped in each other and the sound of rain, until Clara's voice calling from the hallway made them spring apart with guilty speed. Later, as Benjamin prepared to leave, he caught Madeline's hand. "There is something I need to discuss with you. Something important." Her stomach fluttered with nerves. "What is it?" "Not today. I want to have this conversation properly, without rushing. But soon. Very soon." He kissed her hand and departed, leaving Madeline standing in the foyer with her heart racing and her mind spinning. That night, alone in her room, she stood at the window and looked out at the rain-washed gardens. 3 years ago, she had sworn never to love again, had built walls so high she thought nothing could breach them. But Benjamin had not tried to breach her walls. He had simply waited on the other side, patient and steady, until she chose to open the gate herself. And now she had. Now she had admitted to loving him, had allowed herself to hope for a future that included more than solitary walks and careful numbness. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she found herself smiling into the darkness, already counting the hours until she would see him again. But just as sleep began to claim her, a nagging thought surfaced. Benjamin had mentioned needing to discuss something important, something that required a proper conversation. And in the morning, when a messenger arrived with an urgent summons, Madeline would discover exactly what that conversation needed to be. The past, it seemed, was not quite finished with either of them. The messenger arrived just after breakfast, his horse lathered from a hard ride. Madeline watched from the morning room window as a footman took the sealed letter to her father's study. Something about the urgency of it made her uneasy. 20 minutes later, Sir Thomas appeared in the doorway, his expression troubled. "Madeline, there is someone at the gate requesting to see you. I have told him he is not welcome, but he insists he will not leave until he speaks with you directly." Her blood turned cold. "Who is it?" "Charles Whitmore." The name hit her like a physical blow. For a moment she could not breathe, could not think. Then training took over, and she straightened her spine. "I will see him." Briefly. "In the drawing room with you present." Sir Thomas looked as if he wanted to argue, but he nodded. "I will have him brought in. And Madeline, you owe him nothing, not one moment of your time if you choose not to give it." 15 minutes later, Charles Whitmore stood in the Ashford drawing room, looking far different from the confident man who had rejected her 3 years ago. His coat was well made, but not new. His face carried lines of stress and disappointment. He looked older, diminished somehow. "Miss Ashford," his voice held a humility she did not remember. "Thank you for seeing me." Madeline remained seated, her hands folded calmly in her lap, though her heart raced. "You have 5 minutes, Mr. Whitmore. Speak your piece." Charles glanced at Sir Thomas, who stood near the fireplace radiating protective fury, then back to Madeline. "I came to apologize, and to explain, if you will allow it." "There is nothing to explain. You ended our engagement publicly and married someone else. The facts require no elaboration, but the reasons do." Charles took a step closer, and Madeline saw desperation in his eyes. "I was young and foolish and convinced that status mattered more than character. Lady Beatrice's family offered connections I thought I needed. I convinced myself that love was less important than advancement, and now you have discovered otherwise?" His face twisted with something like pain. "Lady Beatrice left me 6 months ago for a French comte. She took most of my remaining funds and what was left of my reputation. I have lost everything, Madeline, everything I sacrificed you to gain. I am sorry for your troubles, Mr. Whitmore, but I fail to see what they have to do with me. I came to ask for your forgiveness, and to see if perhaps given time we might begin again." The audacity of it stole her breath. Madeline stood slowly, her composure cracking to reveal the fury beneath. "Begin again? You humiliated me in front of everyone I knew. You made me question my worth, my judgment, my capacity to be loved. You turned me into a cautionary tale and a source of pity, and now, because you have lost what you chose over me, you think you can simply return and I will welcome you?" The door opened, and Benjamin strode in, his expression thunderous. He must have arrived and heard raised voices because he moved immediately to Madeline's side, his presence solid and protective. "I believe the lady has made her position clear, Whitmore. You should leave." Charles's eyes widened, taking in Benjamin's proprietary stance beside Madeline. "The Duke of Blackthorn. I see you have done quite well for yourself after all, Miss Ashford." Benjamin took a dangerous step forward. "You will address her with respect, or you will leave through the window rather than the door." Charles backed toward the exit, his expression shifting between embarrassment and resentment. "I meant no disrespect. I simply wanted to make amends." Madeline found her voice again, clear and strong. "You want absolution, Mr. Whitmore. You want me to tell you that your choices were understandable, that I hold no ill will, that we can part as friends. But I will not give you that comfort. What you did was cruel and cowardly. The fact that life taught you the same lesson changes nothing. Now leave, and do not return." Charles opened his mouth as if to protest, then seemed to think better of it. He bowed stiffly and departed, the door closing firmly behind him. The moment he was gone, Madeline's composure shattered. Her legs gave way, and she would have collapsed if Benjamin had not caught her, his strong arms supporting her weight. "I have you." His voice was gentle against her hair. "I have you." She did not cry. Instead, she shook with the force of emotions too large to name. Relief, rage, vindication. The satisfaction of finally saying what she had held inside for 3 years. Benjamin guided her to the settee, sitting beside her and keeping his arm around her shoulders. Sir Thomas quietly excused himself, leaving them alone. For long minutes, Madeline simply breathed, letting Benjamin's solid presence anchor her. When she finally looked up, she found him watching her with concern and something that looked like pride. "You were magnificent. I was angry. You were both, and you had every right to be. She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. I thought seeing him again would hurt, that it would bring back all the pain and shame, but instead I just felt anger, and then relief that I had moved beyond him. You have moved beyond him, far beyond. Benjamin's hand stroked her hair gently, and Madeline felt something shift inside her. All the fear and doubt she had been carrying dissolved in the face of this simple truth. Charles Whitmore had no power over her anymore. She had survived his betrayal and emerged stronger. And she had found someone who saw her value when she had forgotten it herself. She lifted her head, meeting Benjamin's dark eyes. "Take me somewhere private. Please." His expression shifted, understanding and heat flooding his features. "Madeline, you just had a significant shock. Perhaps we should wait. I have waited 3 years. I am done waiting." She stood, pulling him up with her. Benjamin searched her face, clearly looking for any sign of uncertainty. Finding none, he took her hand and led her through the house to the library, the one room where they could be assured of privacy. He closed the door behind them, and Madeline immediately moved into his arms, kissing him with an intensity that communicated everything she felt: need, desire, trust, love. Benjamin responded in kind, his hands sliding into her hair as he kissed her deeply. When they separated for breath, he cupped her face gently. "Are you certain? I have never been more certain of anything." He kissed her again, then guided her to the chaise near the fireplace. They sank onto it together, and Benjamin's hands moved to the buttons at the back of her dress with careful deliberation. "If you want to stop at any point, you need only say so. I will not want to stop." Each button opened slowly, reverently. Benjamin pressed kisses to each inch of skin he revealed, his touch gentle, despite the desire evident in his darkened eyes. Madeline's fingers worked at his cravat, pulling the fabric away to expose the strong column of his throat. Her hands trembled as she pushed his coat from his shoulders, but not from fear, from anticipation, from the realization that this was real, that she was choosing this, that she trusted him completely. Benjamin eased her dress down, his breath catching when he saw her in nothing but her chemise. His hand traced the curve of her shoulder, then down her arm, as if memorizing her. "You are beautiful, so beautiful." Madeline pulled him down to her, and they came together with a tenderness that made her chest ache. Benjamin took his time, his touches careful and reverent, always watching her face to ensure her comfort. When he finally removed the last barriers between them, skin against skin, Madeline felt tears prick her eyes at the intimacy of it. He kissed her slowly, deeply, as their bodies moved together in perfect rhythm. Every touch spoke of care and respect and love. When pleasure built between them, it felt like a shared crescendo, both of them reaching the peak together before floating down in each other's arms. Afterward, Benjamin pulled a soft throw over them and held her close, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Madeline tucked her head beneath his chin, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. "None. You? Never." They lay together in comfortable silence, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, creating patterns of light and shadow across their intertwined forms. Madeline had never felt so safe, so cherished, so completely herself. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. His arms tightened around her. "I love you too, more than I knew it was possible to love anyone. What happens now?" "Now." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "We build a future together, if you will have me." Madeline smiled against his skin. "I will have you, Benjamin Ashford. Today, tomorrow, and every day after." They remained wrapped in each other until the angle of the light warned them that propriety demanded they dress and return to the world. But as Benjamin helped her back into her gown, pressing kisses to her shoulders as he refastened each button, Madeline knew something fundamental had changed. She was no longer the rejected one. She was simply Madeline, loved and chosen and whole. And for the first time in 3 years, she believed in happy endings again. 3 weeks later, the Ashford family made the journey to London for the height of the season. Sir Thomas had secured a townhouse in Mayfair, and Benjamin had promised to join them within days. Madeline found herself caught between excitement at rejoining society on different terms and apprehension about facing the same crowds who had witnessed her humiliation. But everything felt different now. She was different. The first ball they attended proved her point. Where once she had entered ballrooms with dread, now she walked in on her father's arm with her head high. Clara sparkled beside her, thrilled to be in London, while Madeline simply felt calm, centered, chosen. Benjamin arrived precisely when he said he would, his eyes finding hers across the crowded ballroom immediately. He made his way to her side, and Madeline felt the familiar warmth spread through her chest at his nearness. "Miss Ashford, you look breathtaking, Your Grace." She smiled, unable to keep the happiness from her voice. "You are precisely on time. I promised I would be, and I keep my promises." They danced twice that evening, and Madeline noticed the whispers that followed them. But where once gossip had felt like poison, now it simply rolled off her. Let them talk, let them speculate. She knew the truth of what she and Benjamin shared. Over the following days, Benjamin's courtship became unmistakably public. He sent flowers every morning without fail. He called at appropriate hours and stayed for the maximum acceptable time. He secured invitations to every event the Ashfords attended and danced with Madeline at each one. He also sent her a first-edition volume of poetry she had mentioned wanting, along with a note in his bold handwriting, "For the woman who is teaching me that vulnerability is strength." Madeline pressed the note to her chest and smiled like a fool. One afternoon, as she prepared for yet another social engagement, Clara burst into her room with eyes wide. "Madeline, have you heard? Lady Vivian Valenti has returned to London. Everyone is talking about it." The name meant nothing to Madeline. "Who is Lady Vivian Valenti?" Clara settled on the bed, clearly relishing the gossip. "She is a widow, incredibly beautiful and sophisticated. She spent years on the continent after her husband died. But the important part is that she and the Duke were quite close before she left England. Some say she was the great love he never quite recovered from." Madeline's hands stilled on the necklace she was fastening. Surely if that were true, he would have mentioned her. Perhaps he thought it was not relevant, or perhaps it is painful for him to discuss. That evening at the Thornbury ball, Madeline tried to dismiss Clara's words as mere gossip. But when a stunning woman entered the ballroom, all dark hair and dramatic beauty, wearing a gown of deep crimson that made every other woman look pale by comparison, Madeline felt a flutter of unease. The woman moved through the crowd with theatrical grace, and everywhere she passed, conversation followed. She was magnetic in a way that demanded attention, and Madeline found herself watching despite her intention not to care. "That is Lady Vivian," Clara whispered beside her. "She looks like she stepped out of an Italian painting." She was not wrong. Lady Vivian was objectively stunning, with the kind of beauty that seemed almost otherworldly. Where Madeline felt she had finally learned to appreciate her own quiet elegance, this woman blazed. Benjamin appeared at Madeline's side, but before he could speak, Lady Vivian spotted him. Her face lit with genuine pleasure, and she glided toward them with purpose. "Benjamin." Her voice was low and musical, with a hint of continental accent. "How wonderful to see you again." "Vivienne." Benjamin's tone was polite, but noticeably cooler. "Welcome back to London." She touched his arm with easy familiarity, her fingers lingering. "It has been too long. We must catch up properly. There is so much I need to tell you." Madeline watched the interaction, noting how comfortable Lady Vivian seemed with Benjamin, how her body angled toward him as if they shared secrets. Something twisted in her chest. Benjamin gently extracted his arm from her touch. "Lady Vivian, may I present Miss Madeline Ashford?" "Madeline, this is Lady Vivian Valenti, recently returned from Italy." Vivian's dark eyes assessed Madeline with the precision of someone cataloguing competition. Her smile remained fixed but cooled noticeably. "Miss Ashford, how charming. I have heard the most interesting rumors about you and dear Benjamin." "Have you?" Madeline kept her voice level. "How fascinating that people have nothing better to discuss." Vivian's laugh was musical but held an edge, Oh, but it is such a romantic story, the rejected wallflower capturing the heart of the impossible duke, like something from a novel. The words were calculated to wound, delivered with a smile that made them even more cutting. Madeline felt Benjamin tense beside her. "Lady Vivian, I believe Lady Pemberton is attempting to get your attention." Benjamin's voice held warning. Vivienne glanced over her shoulder, then back at Benjamin. "We really must speak privately, Benjamin. Soon. It is quite urgent. Then you may call during appropriate hours and leave your card." She smiled again, this time with something that looked like triumph. "I shall do exactly that. Miss Ashford, how lovely to meet you." She swept away, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and unsettled energy in her wake. Madeline waited until they were alone before speaking. "She is very beautiful." Benjamin turned to face her fully. "She is also very dramatic and quite skilled at manipulation. Please do not let her performance disturb you. You were close once, years ago, before I understood what I truly valued in a connection. And what is that? Honesty, authenticity, someone who sees me as a person rather than a title." He took her hand. "Everything Vivian is not, and everything you are." Madeline wanted to believe him, but doubt had begun to creep in, insidious and familiar. Over the following week, Lady Vivian seemed to appear everywhere Benjamin and Madeline went. At garden parties, she would position herself near Benjamin, touching his arm, whispering in his ear, laughing at private jokes. At the theatre, she occupied a box directly across from theirs, her gaze fixed on Benjamin throughout the performance. The newspapers began running items pairing their names, suggesting that the Duke's interest in Miss Ashford was merely a diversion while waiting for Lady Vivian's return. Morning scandal sheets printed sketches of Vivian and Benjamin together from years past, speculating about rekindled romance. Madeline told herself it meant nothing, that Benjamin had proven his devotion repeatedly, that she trusted him, but the old fears began to surface. The familiar whisper that she was not enough, that someone more exciting would always win, that she was foolish to believe she could hold the attention of a man like Benjamin. Then Benjamin missed calling 2 days in a row, sending only brief notes about urgent business at his estate. When he finally appeared on the 3rd day, he seemed distracted, troubled by something he would not share. "Is everything well?" Madeline asked carefully. "Yes." "No." He ran a hand through his hair. "There are matters I need to resolve, nothing for you to worry about. But I do worry, especially when you shut me out. I am not shutting you out. I simply need time to handle certain complications." "Complications involving Lady Vivian?" His expression shifted to something like guilt before he could mask it. Madeline felt her heart sink. "Benjamin, if there is something between you and her, I need to know. I cannot endure uncertainty. Not again. There is nothing between us. Not anymore." "Not for years. Then why does she act as if she has a claim on you? Why do you look guilty when I mention her name? Because she is attempting to manipulate a situation that ended long ago, and I am trying to resolve it without causing unnecessary scandal or hurting anyone. Hurt me by lying or withholding truth, and you will cause far more pain than any scandal could." He reached for her hands, but she stepped back. "I am not lying. I simply need a few days to ensure that the past remains in the past where it belongs. How many days? I do not know, however long it takes." The familiar feeling of abandonment washed over Madeline. Men who promised to stay but left anyway. Men who claimed to value her but prioritized other concerns. Then go. Resolve your complications. But do not expect me to simply wait and wonder and doubt. "Madeline, please." "No. You promised me honesty. You promised not to run when things became difficult. And now you are doing exactly that. I am protecting you. By leaving me in the dark? By allowing that woman to parade around London, acting as if she owns you while I stand by looking like a fool. That is not protection, Benjamin. That is exactly what Charles did. The comparison made him flinch. I'm nothing like Charles, then prove it. Stay. Talk to me. Trust me with whatever burden you are carrying." For a moment, she thought he would. She saw the struggle play across his face. Then he stepped back. "I need to go, but I swear to you, Madeline, this will be resolved soon." He left, and Madeline stood alone in the drawing room, fighting tears. That evening she attended Lady Pemberton's soiree with her head high and her heart heavy. She danced with appropriate partners, made polite conversation, and pretended not to notice Benjamin's absence, until she overheard two women talking behind their fans. "Did you hear? The Duke was seen leaving Lady Vivian's townhouse late last night. Apparently they were closeted together for hours." Madeline's blood turned cold. She made it through the remainder of the evening through sheer force of will. When she finally returned home, she sat in the dark drawing room and faced an awful truth. She had allowed herself to trust again, had allowed herself to love, had believed that this time would be different. But perhaps some patterns simply repeated themselves. Perhaps she was destined to always be second choice, the safe option men returned to when their more exciting preferences proved unavailable. She thought of Benjamin's hands on her skin, his whispered promises, the way he had looked at her as if she were his entire world. Had it all been lies? Or had he simply been waiting for someone better to come along? The questions tormented her through the sleepless night, and by morning, Madeline had made a decision. She would not sit around waiting for answers that might never come. She would not allow Benjamin's silence to diminish her the way Charles's betrayal had. If he wanted her, he knew where to find her. But she would not wait forever, not even for love. 2 days passed with no word from Benjamin. Madeline attended social functions with Clara, maintained her composure, and refused to discuss the situation with anyone. She would not give society the satisfaction of seeing her crumble again. On the third evening, at the Thornbury summer ball, she stood near the terrace doors watching couples dance, the same ballroom where she had first seen Benjamin. Full circle, she thought bitterly. Miss Ashford. His voice made her turn. Benjamin stood in the shadows just beyond the doorway, still in evening dress but looking exhausted. Lines of strain marked his face, and his usual impeccable appearance was slightly disheveled. "Your Grace." Her voice was cool, controlled. "May I have 5 minutes of your time? Privately." Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, but she had promised herself she would face things directly now, not hide from them. 5 minutes. She followed him onto the terrace and down the steps into the garden. They walked in silence until they reached a secluded bench beneath a flowering arbor. Moonlight filtered through the leaves, creating patterns of light and shadow. Benjamin turned to face her, and she saw raw emotion in his expression. "I owe you an explanation and an apology, then give them." He took a breath, clearly choosing his words carefully. "Vivian and I were involved years ago before my engagement to Lady Catherine. It was intense but ultimately shallow. I ended it when I realized we wanted fundamentally different things. She wanted status and excitement. I wanted authenticity and peace. And now she has returned wanting you back." She returned claiming to have information that could damage my family's reputation. Information about financial dealings from my late father's estate. She threatened to release it publicly unless I agreed to resume our relationship. Madeline felt her anger shift to confusion. "So the time you spent away, the visits to her townhouse, were me calling her bluff with the help of my solicitors and investigators. The information she claimed to have was either fabricated or irrelevant. We proved it conclusively 2 days ago. She has left London rather than face the consequences of attempted blackmail. Why did you not tell me this from the beginning? Because I was trying to protect you from ugly scandal. Because I thought I could handle it quietly and spare you the distress." He stepped closer. "But I realize now that by shutting you out, I hurt you far more than the truth ever could have." Madeline felt tears prick her eyes. "You left me doubting, wondering if I was once again the woman who was not enough. If you were choosing someone more exciting, more sophisticated, more everything I am not." Benjamin moved quickly, taking her hands in his. "No. God, no. Madeline, you are everything. You are the only woman I have ever loved with my whole heart. The only person who makes me want to be better, to be more honest, to risk everything. Then why did it feel like you were leaving me? Because I was a fool. Because I let fear of scandal matter more than trust between us. Because I forgot that you are strong enough to face anything, and that facing it together would have been better than facing it alone." A tear escaped, tracking down her cheek. Benjamin wiped it away gently with his thumb. "I am sorry, Madeline, truly deeply sorry. I promised not to run when things became difficult, and I did exactly that. I failed you." "Yes, you did." The blunt honesty made him flinch, but he did not look away. "Can you forgive me?" Madeline studied his face, seeing genuine remorse and fear. Fear that he had lost her, fear that his mistake had been fatal. "I can forgive you. But Benjamin, if this is to work between us, you cannot protect me from difficult truths. You cannot shut me out when life becomes complicated. I am not fragile. I do not need sheltering. I need partnership. You are absolutely right, and I swear to you, I will never make that mistake again. How can I trust that? Because losing you these past days has been the worst experience of my life. Far worse than any scandal could ever be. And I refuse to risk that pain again." He released her hands and dropped to one knee on the garden path. Madeline's breath caught as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "Madeline Ashford, I am far from perfect. I make mistakes. I let fear drive my decisions when I should let love guide them instead. But I am learning, and I want to spend the rest of my life learning with you." He opened the box, revealing a stunning ring. A deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds that caught the moonlight and threw it back in brilliant sparks. "I chose this because it reminded me of your eyes when you play piano. That particular shade of blue when you lose yourself in the music and forget to guard your heart. I want to see that expression every day for the rest of my life. Benjamin, marry me, Madeline. Not because I am a duke and you would gain status, not because it would silence the gossips or repair your reputation. Marry me because I love you with everything I am, because you make me better, because I cannot imagine a future without you in it." Her tears fell freely now, but she was smiling through them. "If you leave me like that again, I will not be here when you return. I know. And I promise you, Madeline, I will never leave you wondering or doubting again. Whatever difficulties we face them together. Always." She looked at the ring, then at his face. At the man who had seen past her walls, who had been patient with her healing, who had made mistakes but owned them, who loved her not despite her damage but because of everything she was. Yes. His face transformed with joy and relief. "Yes. Yes, Benjamin Ashford, I will marry you." He stood quickly, sliding the ring onto her finger before pulling her into his arms and kissing her deeply. Madeline kissed him back with everything she felt, all the fear and anger and love and hope tangled together into something beautiful and real. When they separated, both breathing hard, Benjamin pressed his forehead to hers. "I want you forever, Madeline. Not just for now, not until something better comes along. Forever." The words from her story's title, spoken at exactly the right moment. Madeline felt something inside her chest expand and settle simultaneously. Forever sounds perfect. They returned to the ballroom hand in hand, and Benjamin immediately sought out Sir Thomas. The announcement was made within the hour. Miss Madeline Ashford, once rejected and ridiculed, was engaged to the Duke of Blackthorn. The scandal sheets would have a field day. The gossips would talk for months, and Madeline did not care even a little bit. 2 months later, on a crisp December morning with snow falling gently outside, Madeline Ashford became Madeline, Duchess of Blackthorn. The wedding was held at St. George's in London, attended by everyone who mattered in society. As she walked down the aisle on her father's arm, Madeline saw Benjamin waiting at the altar. His expression held such love, such certainty, that any lingering doubts dissolved like snow in sunlight. This was real, this was right. This was the happy ending she had stopped believing in. When Benjamin took her hands and spoke his vows, his voice was steady and sure. When she responded with her own promises, she meant every word. And when they were pronounced husband and wife, when Benjamin kissed her in front of everyone who had witnessed her humiliation 3 years ago, Madeline felt something she had never expected to feel again, complete, not because a man had chosen her, but because she had chosen herself, had chosen to risk again, to trust again, to believe in love again, despite every reason not to. The rejected wallflower had become a duchess. But more importantly, she had become herself again, strong, whole, and absolutely certain of her worth. And that, more than any title or ring, was the true happy ending. She had sworn never to love again, had built walls so high that nothing could breach them. But love, real love, does not breach walls. It waits patiently on the other side until you are ready to open the gate yourself. Madeline learned that healing is not about forgetting pain, but about refusing to let pain define you. That second chances are not about erasing the past, but about writing a better future. That sometimes the greatest courage is not in protecting your heart, but in offering it again, scarred and imperfect, to someone who will cherish it. Can broken hearts truly heal? Or do they simply learn to beat differently, stronger for having survived the breaking? If this story touched your heart, would you leave a like? Not just as a click, but as a way of saying you believe in second chances too. Subscribe to this channel if you want more stories about real love, real healing, and real courage. And please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. I love knowing that these words are reaching hearts around the world, creating a community of people who believe that our past does not dictate our future. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing alongside Madeline that happy endings are possible even after the worst beginnings.